Okay, live streaming has started. If you can see on the top left-hand corner of the screen, the live streaming link will be there. Ruchin, you want to say something? Oh, okay, I think, okay, the unmuting option was disabled. I have enabled it. Yes, Ruchin.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hello.
I can see the live on YouTube, so that's great. Thanks so much. Are you going to stay on or are you going to drop off?
No, I am going to stay on. I'll be there, but yeah, Pramod, you wanted the host rights back. Do you want to change it and see if it still works? Or is it okay if I can continue and I can give you co-host rights? Pramod has left the meeting or? Okay, I
He's
cannot see Pramod.
Hey, yeah,
Yeah,
Vidyut, I
yeah.
was on mute. Yeah, so I can do the host part. No need to do that host wala part, huh? As I will take care. Huh? You can transfer the host right, and you can take the co-host wala part.
Okay, so check. I will give you the host rights back, but check if the live streaming still works. So let's try it out.
Yeah,
Um, okay, social Attenio. This is the account with which you have logged in, right?
right, right, right.
Okay, make host.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, I have given you the host rights.
Right. I think Vidyut, it's working fine. I have tried refreshing the page on YouTube.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
working.
Yes,
Okay,
it
I
is
have given
working.
you the host rights. Okay,
Uh,
fine.
why it is showing social Ateneo still? It's showing social Ateneo. Now it's showing my name. Yeah, fine. Right. I think Vidyut, it's working fine. I have tried refreshing the page on YouTube.
Vidyut,
Yeah,
Vidyut,
hi Rijas. Yeah.
I think now we should
Uh,
allow participants. Hi. So it's already 4:56. So
Yeah, Pramod Bhai is the
Yeah,
host, so he has to allow.
allow all the
Yeah.
participants, but just one thing, Ruchin, we will start the event at 5:05. Huh? People will take time, some time to join. So till 5, people will be joining. Huh? I'm
yeah.
admitting
yeah,
all the members. Yeah.
So
yeah. So Ruchil can say around 5 that we are waiting for participants to join. So give us few minutes.
yeah, sure. Yeah, I see people have already started joining.
Hello everyone. Ruchin, can we do the mic test for Unmesh?
Yeah, let's do that. Can you unmute Unmesh so then we can just quickly test and then get started after some time.
Hey, Unmesh, hi. Can you unmute? Yeah.
Yeah, I could unmute myself. So this is fine now. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Unmesh, we can hear you clearly.
Fantastic. Very good.
So we will wait for 2 to 3 minutes more to admit all the participants to allow more participants to join, and then we will begin.
Sure.
So, Ruchin, I think we should start the event. Just one thing that I would like to announce. I have the host right of this account. So anyone who wants to speak up or there is a change in the event sequence can just raise the hand and I will manually go and unmute you. Okay, guys, thanks. We can start now. Bye-bye.
Okay, just let me quickly share video and then I will start it. Okay. First of all, welcome everyone. Thanks for spending some time with us today. On behalf of the IIT Bombay Bangalore chapter, Alumni Association, I really thank all of you because you all came here to listen to us. It's the first time we are doing something like this, which is a design series from the IIT Bombay Alumni Association. So let's see how it goes. With that, let me start by asking Devesh, who's the CEO of IIT Bombay Alumni Association, to speak a few words. He's been really supportive and he's really encouraged us to do this. So I request him to kind of let us know what he feels about this and introduce the IIT Bombay Alumni Association as well.
Thank you, Ruchin. Firstly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at the event. This is a great initiative by you and the IIT Bombay Alumni Association Bangalore chapter, specifically the design track. So when we think of IIT Bombay, not many people think of design as something that's part of IIT Bombay's curriculum. But actually, we have an industrial design center which actually just completed 50 years this January, and so it has several different tracks. And hopefully we can get to know a little bit more about what they do as well during the course of these design series that is being spearheaded by Ruchin and his team here. So thank you again, Ruchin, for introducing the rest of the alumni to the design track and to the fact that we actually, that it's part of the IIT Bombay curriculum. Regarding IIT Bombay Alumni Association, we've been around for about 20 years now. We're basically on the campus in the Gulmohar building. We're a separate NGO that works closely with IIT Bombay. And we sort of do things that supplement what IIT Bombay does. We work closely with the Dean Alumni and Corporate Relations Office. One of the main tasks that we do is organize the reunions for classes, including the Silver Jubilee reunion and so on, and also smaller batch reunions. Of course, now that because of the pandemic, these are virtual. The other thing that we do is we basically are structured worldwide through the form of chapters. And so the Bangalore chapter is one of 13 chapters in India. And we also have several chapters around the world. And actually, the Bangalore chapter is one of our most active chapters with all the different tracks that we have. Thank you again for this. Of course, normally the events would be physical, where you actually got together and met each other. But due to the pandemic, the chapter has adapted quite well and transferred the events virtually. And they've been going quite well with at least 2 events a month for the last several months. So thank you to the leadership of the Bangalore chapter for this. The other things that we do are we also have some initiatives on the campus for students, such as a financial aid program, also a hostel improvement program, and so on. A lot of these programs are funded through alumni, through the legacy projects, which are basically part of the Silver Jubilee reunions and so on. So that's it in a nutshell from me, from the IIT Bombay Alumni Association. I know you're here to hear Ruchin and his team, so back to Ruchin.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Pramod, who's going to speak a little bit more about the Bangalore chapter and its activities, and then we move on to the next bit.
Thanks, Chin. Thanks, Devesh. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I would like to thank all the participants and especially Mr. Unmesh Kulkarni, who is the speaker of this event. So I am fortunate to be a part of this Bangalore chapter. So Bangalore chapter is one of the most chapters in both bringing all the alumni together based in Bangalore and organizing some good events in the past several years. So earlier core team started this local area network initiative in July 2019, and in terms of bringing or building the alumni network, we have done a really good job, and we are now a family of more than 900 unique alumni across 9 hyperlocal groups in Bangalore. Talking about the Buddy Chapter initiative, then Bangalore and Kolkata has done a long-term joint collaboration. So the idea is to encourage smaller alumni networks to become more active and providing support in terms of the resources and also encouraging their enthusiasm. And likewise, we are also planning to have collaborative events in future with other smaller chapters as well. And one more initiative that we are focusing on is the Karnataka Outreach Initiative, where we are reaching out to the alumni who are staying in different cities of Karnataka, likewise in Mysore, in Hubli and other cities of Karnataka. So we are reaching out to them, and we have now started getting some tractions out of them. So in February this year, we have started 10 domain specific tracks. Like design track is one of them. So we have started several tracks like agri tech is one of them, engineering track is one of them. So likewise, to make this engagement more meaningful and to bring out some productive out of this engagement. So we have started domain specific tracks, and recently we have started this design track that who is conducting this event. So I wish all the best to Ruchin and Vinod and Bhushan for this. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Pramod. All right, so let's get to the meat of the presentation. I'm going to introduce Unmesh a little bit, and I'm sure I will not be doing justice, but I'm going to try anyway. I actually I heard this name, Unmesh's name, when I first moved to Bangalore 3 years ago, and that was through a colleague of mine at that time. And all good things, Unmesh. Yeah. But very recently, I kind of got a chance to speak to him on a more personal level because a common friend introduced us, and that was quite interesting. And because I spoke to Unmesh recently, and this event was sort of slated to happen, I found some congruency in the way that people were thinking about, like what we were thinking about and what Unmesh was talking about. And the reason why we invited him and why we thought he was a perfect fit for this first event is because he's actually got a lot of experience in building design teams at startups in larger organizations like Philips and Honeywell. So, and now he's at it again. He's started up it's a new startup called Oceanic Circles, and it's a collective for social impact and innovation. So with that, I will welcome Unmesh, and I would like him to take the stage. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ruchin, for a generous introduction. I think it's fantastic. I mean, what I see youngsters like you are, getting so active and spreading the word about design, because it's one thing to say that nobody knows about design, but to engage communities and communities as esteemed as IIT Bombay Alumni Association, and to take this dialogue further, I think it's really commendable. And I really compliment you and Bhushan and whoever is involved from, Alumni Association. I think it's really commendable. I'm also thankful to IIT Bombay Alumni Association for this opportunity. I hope I do the justice to the first such session and, make sure that everybody stays interested in what design is all about. Yeah, so I think without much ado, I think let's dive into what we're going to discuss today. Typically, I will take you through slideshow. My request is if you could put your questions or comments in chat box. I think we can take them through at the end of the session, depending on how much time we got left. And at any point in time, you feel from the organizer's side or somebody's side, just raise your hand in case you need me to stop or answer something, or if things are not going right in terms of presentation or screen sharing, etc. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So Ruchin, can you help me or Pramod, help me get the screen sharing rights? So today's talk is about design language, or design identity. So, so we all know that it's strongly related to what brands are and what brand identity means. But I'm going to focus purely on design identity and design language because I feel that's how we manifest brands. So I want to just quickly do a check in terms of what we're going to cover and what we are not going to cover. So this is about design identity, and I'll talk about very briefly all kinds of aspects that come into design identity management. It's a fairly loose set of thoughts, and I thought it's better to do a broader introduction rather than getting into deep dive into how it is managed or why it is managed, because I don't think that would be the objective for this group in terms of learning how to do design identity. And also I'll touch upon what design identity system means and what the governance means, because those are very important points in terms of setting up a design identity system, uh, creating the whole package or system, and also managing it. So we are not going to talk about brand identity design because that's a different topic, and that's more broader. So I'll introduce you to that. So yeah, so to start with, I just want to ask you a question to the audience. You can type your answers in the chat box very quickly. Let's take 2-3 minutes or maybe on this. It'll be nice if you can just write your understanding or your definition of brand and brand identity. So just open your chat box and put it. So Ruchin, can you see any responses?
Yes, I think Pari has answered brand is how you are perceived. And the second response is from Swam. Swam is saying that it tells what feeling it will evoke in a person. Ruchin has also contributed the feeling that a product or service imparts to those who come in touch with it.
Fantastic. I think fabulous answers. So indeed, brand is how it is perceived by who you are targeting at, and it is not how you define it. Yeah. So that's very clear. Whereas identity or design identity we talk about is something that we create so that people perceive the brand in a certain way. So I think that's something I wanted to clarify right in the beginning, what brand means and what design identity and brand identity would mean. Now, just very briefly, we talk about design organization and different roles design organization can play. Yeah, and what we have to remember is typically a design organization does a lot of things these days, and we are fairly deeply engaged in most of the organizations in terms of running design sprints or playing a role in innovation, research, uh, building a creative organization, having these design tools and processes proliferate in the organization, and experience and design identity management is one big piece, and I think that's something which I want to talk about. Now typically, when you talk about design identity, it relies a lot on what I would say core principles and values, and essentially it is about talking about these values, experiences, stories, and relationships. We will probably briefly talk about each of these as we move forward. So typical values are, a company says that we put people first, or we make people creative, or we unleash imagination, or we make people active. So there could be a lot of things in terms of what they define as a purpose, and then what they define as values in terms of how they're going to deliver that purpose, or how do they going to achieve their goal. I think there's a lot of things that get said there, And it's also about experiences, so essentially, when you say, oh, I got a new phone and it like works so fabulously, or I got a new phone and everything looked fine, but I just can't get it started, so things like that, so those experiences are very important. And then the stories that we tell, in terms of what the product, object, or that app, or whatever you talk about Touchpoint does. So I think telling stories about that, and essentially it forges relationships which are essentially between people and the brand, people and the products, and those are very important because that's where the value is recognized. Now, we have to remember, it's not about it's not about uniformity, or it's not about putting products in a uniform, because whenever I talked about design identity, I face a lot of resistance, saying, oh, you want to make everything identical, we need some variety, our customers are different, we deal with different segments. And people sometimes miss a point that design identity is not about uniformity, it's about unification. Because when you have a uniformity, this is what you end up with. Somebody's followed the guidelines, graphic guidelines, in a kind of a blind manner, to put in a pesticide as a cooking spray in a similar kind of packaging, and this kind of a thing can have disastrous effect, of course. Yeah. So whereas we talk about unified design language, I think one of the best example that comes to me is Braun, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. So Braun created this entire design language based on 10 principles, which Dieter Rams, who was heading Braun design in the last century, he defined those, and he created a whole lot of these products which are even today considered classics. I mean, they defined how a modern product should be designed, how the entire interface, usability, that kind of becomes integral part of the product, and how do you build in authenticity and trust through design. I mean, so much so that these principles are still guiding light for a lot of design companies, and a lot of big brands, including Apple. So what you see here is, I mean, you blindly, sort of look at any of these products, and they must be coming in from Braun, because there's something binds them, and that's the whole unification piece. Whereas they're not identical, they're not same shape, they're not same color, material, finish, they're not same architecture. And I think that's the whole beauty of these principles. And I think you should refer to these 10 principles. I'll come back to them a little bit later also. But essentially, these principles are not just about doing good design, but to build a good design trust, a good design relationship with the end user, a good relationship with the end user in terms of how they perceive and use the product. So these are very important, and they have something simple things like, good design is honest. Good design is aesthetic. So you can't design something that looks bad or it's not in good proportion. Then you say good design is unobtrusive. You don't want your products and your surroundings to shout that I'm here, unless its function requires it. So I mean, you to be innovative when you design something, and things like that. So it's a fabulous set of principles, which I guess a lot of you know, but you should read them often. I mean, you should have probably somewhere print out. So I'm taking an example from Honeywell, which is my recent story. And these are sensing and productivity solutions. Essentially, Honeywell has a whole business that creates these solutions for logistics and retail and supply chain kind of industry. So essentially, Honeywell is a B2B player, mainly into industrial, sort of cyber industrial space. I was working for building technologies business, but I thought this was a good case study to talk about, because also it's published and award winning. It's done by my colleagues in Seattle. My work I cannot still show because it's not 100% out. It's out in bits and pieces, so you won't see a collective picture like this. So Teak Design and Honeywell User Experience team created this new design language system for Honeywell's sensing and productivity solution business. So these are essentially some hand scanners and headphones and printers and and stuff like that. So these are used by people who deliver couriers or people who do retail scans and those kind of things. So now if you see what has been done, Honeywell has a red color as a dominant color, and essentially that red color used to be our predominant identity signature, whereas it didn't mean anything. In fact, red has a lot of connotation in terms of danger or attention seeking or alarm. So we had to remove that. So what team has done is we use the red in a way on functional pieces, on pieces where there's an interaction involved or we need to seek attention. And then the whole identity got a little bit more muted. There's a certain robustness that's required in these products, which was built in through details and the form details, which I think sort of led the foundation for our entire design language system. So just to tell you, this was what the landscape looked like early days. So if you go to this website on tig.com on the Honeywell project, you'll see a short video in terms of how it was built. So this is how the whole universe looked like, where individually these products are great designs, probably designed by fairly talented designers, but each product was designed as a signature product, and essentially that doesn't build a coherent image or a feeling about what Honeywell brand is about or what these products are all about. And essentially this identity tries to put that in the right perspective in terms of making people recognize that they come from a house which cares for details, and it creates products which are easily recognizable, because once you use one product, you know how to use another one, or at least recognize the broad functionality, and so on and so forth. So I think this was very interesting. So just to tell you that, when you don't have design identity system, you create products which are very diverse and very unique in a way, but they don't serve a purpose beyond a point because end users don't recognize that. So whereas if you have something which is more sophisticated and robust, I think that creates a better comfort and a trust in end users' mind. So again, it's not just about using what colors brand specifies. In our industrial safety products, the regulators want us to use yellow as a color. And this is what the team did. We used yellow. But if you see the whole identity and the feel that, you feel still the product belongs to the family. And I think that's the strength of a very good design identity system. Now, again, that gets also translated in terms of, I talked about hardware because that's a much tougher piece in terms of building identity systems. But software, of course, is being driven by a lot of new standards, and a lot of things are changing pretty fast in terms of how things could be done. But again, there still could be extremely well engineered software versus extremely usable software. So what you see on the left hand side are two pieces of our building management systems software pieces, where you're talking about managing building parameters like HVAC and other control systems. Whereas the same software, when it's translated to facility management software, which has very different look and feel in terms of what it does and what information it provides to the end user, and how it kind of builds, because you can customize the entire dashboard to your requirements. Now, talking about something which something we use every day, and this is a screen grab from Amazon Amazon app, and essentially, though it's a very busy app, I mean, personally, I sometimes don't like it, but it serves the purpose, because what it does is it has very clear signatures in terms of a big description of a product with a title, then understanding of price options, and then there's a very clear indication of call to action buttons in terms of do something. And this is very smartly done, because this allows Amazon to talk to even people who are not software savvy, who can do shopping on Amazon, because it's a very easy way to navigate for them. So I think that's another way to define what are those signatures. And to me, for Amazon, these are the identity pieces which beautifully translate into very functional and very usable pieces. Now, there's a lot of work that's being done in terms of how companies evolve, and when they evolve their design identity system or design language systems. So Microsoft recently did the whole fluent language, yeah, based on these 5 principles, and the whole beauty is the change becomes very visible. I mean, if you've done any change in terms of how softwares work, what features and functions it provides, or how it works across different platforms, uh, and you're supporting that with a very refreshing design identity, and that really works very well in terms of communicating that point. Yeah. uh, Similarly, Google, of course, is a purely software company, and they are getting into a lot of these hardware products, which are interesting. And if you look at their how the language is evolving in terms of those soft shapes and very powdery kind of finishes, I think they're creating a whole language around that to sort of excite the market to use more and more products. I mean, in some of their applications, they're doing things like Nest, etc. So there's a certain language that they're trying to evolve there. Yeah. So essentially, what we're talking about is unification is about recognition. Unification is about tying up things which cut across portfolios, but at the same time allow brands to stand distinct from each other, brands to stand distinct from each other, and also allows brand to distinguish portfolio from each other. Like this is a Android phone versus these are whatever Google speakers, etc. So they look and feel very different amongst them, but it also binds the portfolio together. And that's the whole unification piece versus uniformity, and that's the whole piece about what a design identity could leave you with. Now, just another example in terms of MacBook versus Surface versus ThinkPad. I mean, even in terms of how these products are shot or how the products are built, how the sort of the kind of level of aggression or level of confidence they display, the unique features they show. I think these are essentially part of the way company wants these portfolios or these products to be perceived. And that's the whole game that design identity plays. So having said that, I want to come to a core point in terms of uh, definition of where the brand and design identity plays. And as earlier rightly pointed out, the design identity is outward expression of what the brand of a brand, which includes trademark, name, communication, visual appearance. So that's the essential definition of what brand identity means. And of course, we know that brand is not how we define it. Brand is how people perceive it. So this is a very essential definition, but if you read it deeply, it's still a very superficial or surface level definition of what brand means. Whereas I like this framework where I was looking at what is the deeper meaning of what brand and brand identity means, and this Cafferer has defined this identity prism. So can you still hear me, Ruchin?
Yes, we can hear you, Amish.
Okay. So I don't know whether I should switch off the video because the network said it's low. But let me know in case there's any problem. So this Cafferer's brand identity prism essentially has these two axes where we talk about externalization and internalization. So we're talking about what appears for the outside world and how things built up inside, within an organization or a brand, and then and how things are received and how things are sent. So I think in terms of uh, so essentially there are two sides to this framework, and you talk about physics, which is externalized, so how people perceive a particular touch point in its form, I mean, in its use, or everything that you talk about a product or a service, and what personality it we have in terms of internal personality. So we talk about how people perceive it physically. I mean, in terms of how it appears and how it looks and feels and works, and then that builds a kind of relationship between that particular touch point and the user. And that relationship could be, you say, oh, it's not for me. Or somebody might say, oh, this is for so and so, it's perfect. I mean, this looks like something which maybe Shah Rukh Khan can use, or or I don't want to use this. My car is different from, say, somebody else's. So I think that's the relationship where people can sort of decide what what is the right fit for them, and then the whole reflection is the feedback that you get. And essentially that's how external world interacts with your brand or brand identity, whereas internalization is all about how you build that personality in terms of its identity, its elements, its behavior, it's the details, etc. And at the core of that is the whole culture, and which is driven by the values that we talked about. What is the internal culture in terms of how we treat these products, how we treat our customers, how we understand them. And essentially that at the end builds a self-image. And this is very important because when everybody in an organization has a similar self-image, you realize that people work in unison in terms of making that their vision come alive, or the way they treat customers. I mean, there's a whole lot of consistency in there. So I think this is a fantastic model because it goes beyond value of design identity as a superficial visual elements to more deeper elements in terms of building perception, promising customer how we care for them, or creating a certain image, seeking feedback from them, and establishing relationships. So I think there's a whole lot of I would say customer affinity that gets built through this. And that's where, when we talk about empathy, a lot of times we put it in an extremely functional or extremely dry manner. But essentially empathy also means that there's a mutual understanding or a mutual sort of connect between the customer and you. And a lot of times that comes not just by delivering a product that works, but creating that emotional connect. And that's a very important thing, because people, as Simon Sinek says, people, don't buy because, what you do, but why you do that. They're looking for whether you have a purpose. And that's the whole relationship piece, right? So I won't get into detail. There are a lot of examples of this: Kaffer's identity, Prism, etc. So how does one build strong brand identity? And I think these are some of the guiding, I would say, principles. One is it should be distinct. So when we say distinct, you don't sort of make a Me Too thing. So you want to stand out among competitors and catch people's attention. Now, it should not be so distinct that people get shocked, of course, but it should be distinct. Then it should be memorable. You have to remember that, again, memory is what is a outcome from that interaction or reaction that people have with your products and services. So essentially, visual impact is very important, because that's the first impact that people have. People look at something and say, oh, it looks cool, and then they use it to say, oh, it works fantastic, it's awesome, or things like that. But it could also be a fairly negative memory in terms of oh, I mean, it looked great in picture, but it doesn't look like that here, or it came in the packaging which didn't feel right. So visual impact is very important. I mean, the first impact and the interactions with the product are very important, because that leaves a certain memory, positive and negative. Scalability and flexibility. So scalability, as in a sense of, if you do a design identity on a product, it should be scalable across portfolio. It should be scalable across value proposition. You may be using a phrase and heard of a phrase called good, better, best, and all kinds of value for money products, and innovative products, or sort of premium segments, etc. So all that is should be coming out of a similar identity and signatures, so that there's a certain binding, thread, invisible thread that binds them. And flexibility, as in a sense of, in case you want to, grow adjacent categories, if you want to grow other, product lines, how does it translate into those, from say hardware, pure hardware, you want to go digital, how does it flexibly translate into digital? Because I think that's something very important, because today people do digital and they do physical, and sometimes they miss the whole connect in between. Cohesive, I think it's important to piece each component of brand identity together, and I think we talked about it a lot in terms of having that unification and cohesion. Very important. Easy to apply. Again, you're talking about, the designer who's creating identity versus a designer who applies identity could be different. Engineer who works with the identity or design language could be different, and then marketeers who talk about it and sell that piece could be very different. So you're talking about multiple stakeholders in an organization who talk about, identity system or design language, and it should be easy for them to use and apply. It should be very intuitive, and I think that's the whole institutionalization piece. They should have a clear idea in terms of who they go to in case there's a dispute, who are the custodians or who are the sort of stewards of this whole language system. I think that should be very clear. Now, I think there's a very strong quote from Maya Angelou. She says that I have learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And when we talk about empathy, or when we talk about compassion, when we talk about, relating to a customer and, establishing relationship, I think it's very important that we don't, skim the surface, but we go deep down in terms of how people think and feel. That's the whole iceberg theory, if you know. So we need to understand that in a much deeper manner. And once we understand that, I think it's very easy to, create solutions which are aspirational or useful, or something that they would look up to, and then it gets very easy. So to talk about that, I just want to talk about, the customer journey that that we see in terms of how customers have certain tasks to finish, tasks to do, and they need a solution for that, and what kind of journey they go through to get the job done. I mean, it could be, say, buying a product from a grocery store, to maybe flying a plane, to opening an account in a bank, to sort of clicking pictures or something like that. Photography could be any task or any job to be done. How do they go through that? So essentially, the journey goes through three phases. They need to the pre-purchase, where they're searching what is the solution, then they purchase the solution. So there's a pre-purchase phase, purchase phase, and once they purchase, then they use it, and that's the whole post-purchase phase. And eventually that leaves a certain memory. So in case they need to go for next round of upgrade or change or another thing, so how do they deal with it? So I think that's the whole journey a customer or a user goes through. Now, this could be defined in a specific context. So how do people build awareness? How do they set the expectations? How do they get the first impression? How do they go through the whole discovery? How do they go through the usage? And what is the memory they want to live with? So it's like, in a say case of a calling taxi, you need to be aware that there's a taxi available. What is the app? How to connect? What is the system in a particular city? Once you have that, then you get the probably app or a tool or a calling number, and then you have an expectation in terms of, I would want a taxi within half an hour, because I'm just going to call before half an hour, or I need a taxi to reach some place which is 50 kilometers away, and things like that. So you set certain expectations, and if things go as per that, you feel, oh, nice, I think I can go with this. But whereas if somebody says, oh, I can't go that side, or I can't come for 2 hours, so I think those are things which puts you off. Then you could cancel the buying decision. Similar thing happens if you're buying, say, a TV or a camera. You go with certain expectation in terms of what specifications you want, but if that doesn't fulfill, you might defer the buying decision. And that's the whole movement of truth that we should be, everybody kind of worries about especially in a consumer space, but also in an enterprise space. And then of course the use and discovery, where you talk about demonstrations, or sort of word of mouth and further research, comparison, etc. people go through. So to mirror this, I think what typical a good company does is has a touch point strategy, where we talk about and there's a brand touch point wheel. I mean, there are a lot of interpretations of this. I just found this ready on Wiki Commons, but essentially we have pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase touch points, and they could vary depending on which industry and category one is in, what kind of target customer you're dealing with, and what kind of buying journey or process they have. So it's very important, because a lot of times our innovation efforts or design efforts focus on essentially the use phase. So we talk about product and services, but we fail to say, what happens before person buys it, what happens after person buys it, what happens in a transition once person is finished using it. I mean, what is the next stage for them? So a lot of things get missed out, and I think this touch point wheel, I mean, this is a very simple exercise one could do in every company. You should just have a customer journey map for some of your product categories, and you should probably look at what touch points exist and what customers would expect, and what kind of needs and problems they'll have along the journey. I mean, it could be plotted linearly. This is just a graphic representation, but you could try and do that. I think it gives you a lot of idea in terms of what touch points are and how they need to be built. And what we're talking about here in terms of design identity is, how do you bind these different touch points? It could be a web app, it could be a brochure, it could be a retail presence, it could be a sort of a call or a webinar. So when you're talking about a product, then you have a product which is like a software or a hardware or a service, and then there's a whole service piece comes in. So all these things, how do you bind through in a coherent manner, that people go through this entire journey, what they go through, in a frictionless manner? I think that's the whole core at the end of the day. And how do they get the value they're seeking? So best example for that, I would still put as Apple, for two reasons. One is they take care of every touch point in a very meticulous way. So we talk about engage the customer, then sell it to them, then help them install, then help them use, help them maintain, upsell. So you see every touch point, they have created unmatched experience for customer, be it Apple Store, be it the portfolio demonstration, be it the Genius Bar, be it the Unpack experience, or whatever. And a lot of companies are trying to emulate that, but I guess they're the ones who've done it seamless. Now, what you see here up here is the whole advertising piece and how they communicate to customers. Now, maybe just taking a step back, essentially for any kind of touch point, these are essentially, I would call them as above the line touch points, where there's an advertising piece involved, be it television, print, press, etc. So, and these are all below the line. Yeah. So when I'm talking about identity system or design language system, I'm talking about entirely for the below the line touch points. So how do you design retail store? How do you design products and portfolios? How do you design service and demonstrations? How do you design out of the box experience, product experience? How do you do upsell and do some upgrades easily? So I think there's a whole lot of things that they do, and there's a lot of learning for all the companies. Yeah? I don't use Apple example for innovation, but here I definitely I don't use it for innovation because they're a complete anomaly in terms of how do they innovate and drive market. Not many have managed to do that because their entire company works in that fashion. Yeah, but coming back to why is design identity so significant? So there are clearly two benefits. I think we talked a lot in terms of what are the external benefits in terms of establishing, say, relationship or recognition and image building, consistency, and so at the end of the day, it's about managing that perception and trust. Whereas it also, the whole design language system, if you have in place, it also helps you to build a very efficient product creation or a development process. So it helps you to align visions. It helps you to create reusable identity components and guidelines. It allows you to build a platform approach. It essentially creates efficiency. Just to talk about which gray to use, or which green to use, which layout to use. And a lot of times I have seen people tend to be creative on such things, and they reinvent this wheel again and again, and that's completely unproductive. Because if you know who you're designing for and what you're doing, and if you have a clear brand guidelines, I think it's better to focus on the value that you create rather than worry about a green to create, which green to use. And that green should be left to the brand design language team or brand design team to define that. And I think that's a very important piece in terms of governance. And only then the whole investment in design language system pays off in multiples, because your process and thinking becomes that much more efficient. Yeah. So moving quickly, we talking about design recognition, or a brand recognition. And I think one of the big things in this is what value it creates. So Design Management Institute did this Standard and Poor 500 companies analysis over 2005 to 2015, and they separated these companies which they identified as design focused, and they kind of plotted the graph to show that the value creation or a multiple they had was 211% more than the S&P. So essentially, and according to me, I think a design language system or a brand identity system or the whole purpose-driven designing is what drives this perception, and this drives the trust, and this drives purchasing behavior from customers. So essentially, you can tell the world you care and you have a purpose. You can tell customers that you understand them, and you can also assure them that you walk the talk. You define the vision, but you're delivering the products and services that essentially are designed based on the understanding, and they're not by accident. So it's basically gaining trust, loyalty, respect, and also a fairly consistent and a sustainable business, because people start to believe in you. Now, this is the last part where we're talking about managing brand and design identity. I'm just going to briefly talk about it because this is a vast topic. I mean, this could be, the whole training program could be based on this. But we talk about three broad pillars of design identity, design language system. One is brand architecture, which is where the design language system is derived from. Second is designing the identity, just creating that identity, alive, bringing it alive. And the third piece is about governance, and that's again very important. And I think this is, of course, we all know this is Volkswagen, and they have fairly strong brand image. People's car and the German car and the Beetle and the whole innovation they've done, etc., etc. Great stories, but they did something. They didn't walk the talk. They did something which created a huge controversy, not just once but many times. Using Nazi language, cheating the regulators, and all kinds of things that they did, that brought almost the whole automotive industry to ground. And they went through entire phase of suffering for 3-4 years, and they're trying to reinvent themselves. So what we have to realize is, if you don't walk the talk, I think companies punish you. And I think that's where it's important for brand to define what the purpose and vision and values are, and to live by that. And the whole brand architecture is essentially starts from there. So it's a typical pyramid. I think a lot of you might be aware how it works, and there are many interpretations, but this is how I interpret, where on the top you have brand purpose and promise. It's what the brand does, and it's the essence of the brand. Then second level, you have values, attributes, brand DNA, further articulation. And a lot of it is not visual, it's very verbal. And then you talk about either design principles, platform attributes, portfolio attributes, etc. What you want to, sort of how you want to translate things from very abstract vision to more real, principles in terms of say product, person, organization, symbols, etc. And then further down, you have design signatures, and which could be primary signatures, secondary signatures. The signature could be a logo, could be three stripes that Adidas has, could be the simple rounded corner design language that Apple has, which is drawn from Braun. So there could be many signatures. And down below, you have a lot of details, what kind of fonts you'll use, what kind of colors you'll use, what kind of color material finishes you'll use, what kind of, design patterns, web elements you'll use, or UI elements you'll use, or and so on and so forth. There could be many things. Yeah. So this is so we are talking about this bottom piece as a part of design identity system. So starting from signatures and design elements. Yeah. Now, considerations, essentially you need to understand who's your target customer. So it's again driven by research, and it has to be co-created with the customers if you're creating afresh, and you need to be constantly in a feedback loop. So you need to understand what their needs are and motivations are. We're not talking about sociocultural segmentation here, but broader motivational psychographic understanding of customers. The second piece is about broader context and category codes. So I'm going to talk about these two things. The third is a cultural context, which is very broad. I think it's about if you're building it for a youth culture, or you're building a brand for India versus global and stuff like that. So I'm going to talk about these two. So in motivation and perception, you see this colored wheel, which is essentially Sensedium model. Now, this is a model which early days Synovate came up with, and now it belongs to Ipsos because they bought Synovate. So some of the sociologists at Synovate, they looked at how to divide the world into different segments, and they looked at more psychographic profiles rather than socioeconomic or other quantifiable profiles, and they have identified these 8 segments or 8 positions as way to divide the world's population, and it works beautifully, and it works fantastic from the point of view of understanding people's needs and motivation, creating marketing strategies, and defining personas, everything. So we talk about horizontal axis is essentially a social dimension, about people and yourself, and the vertical axis is about personal dimension in terms of your desires and your behavior. So I'll just take this example of belonging, which is on social dimension, where you want to belong to a social community, a culture, tradition, etc., etc. Then I'll talk about control, where control is about self-control. So how do you, as a person, in control of everything? So this is more like a James Bond persona, whereas belonging is, I would say a lot of our grandparents belong to this probably belonging class where they thrive with the community and family, etc. Yeah, and opposite of control is enjoyment. I think you read about this. This is a fabulous documentation all over the network. But what I'm trying to say here is, if you know who you're designing for people who are very expressive, or you're designing people who are very traditional, very simple, community driven, or people who are looking for security and comfort, or people who are looking for power and recognition. I think you'll know how to sort of build the identity and design language. Now, somebody might ask, what happens in a professional world? So typically, most of the times in professional world, you're talking about people who are in control, because at home you may be it's very expressive, but at work you might be in control. So a lot of this will be in play in a professional world, but essentially you're dealing with people at the end of the day who are your users, or who are your creators, or who are your customers. So we need to sort of make sure that we talk their language, and this is very important. The second piece is mapping. Now there could be different mapping tools. This is just one random thing I put, but different ways to map what you're trying to do and where you want to place your brand in terms of how you want people to perceive your brand. And it could be, say, vertical axis from traditional to innovative, and this is known to unique or different. And so you could say, I want to be very different, like stand out, or I want to be more grounded. Or you want to say that, okay, we don't innovate, we are old fashioned, we want to do simple stuff, whereas we want to be very innovative, cutting edge, Tesla kind of things. So I think one could say where things fit in. We'll probably have some example. Yeah. So talking about motivations and perceptions, again, these kind of solutions. I mean, I've taken example from automotive because I think it's universally recognized. So there are certain signatures how these cars are designed, and they're probably, I mean, I would say functionally more or less similar. They may have some features higher and lower and power, etc. But in terms of, I mean, they take you from place A to place B. They're all sedans, whatever, 3-box, and they have headlights and tail lights and steering wheel and wheels. So what I'm saying is they do similar kind of job, but they're bought by different people with a different kind of motivation, like going back to this circle. Yeah. So you'll see somebody who's very traditional, seeking comfort and simple stuff would choose this, versus somebody who's looking for self-expression, who's got energy and enjoyment, youngster would choose probably Honda, whereas somebody who's in control or power would want probably Audi and stuff like that. So if you just put them on the map in terms of how these cars would want them to be perceived, so you can just map them, and you'll realize that they each of these position has a meaning, and there's nothing like right and wrong take, because a lot of times companies, when they give design briefs, they talk about let's create something very innovative, and sometimes it's not necessary, or let's do something which is very distinct, whereas your target customer doesn't want that distinct things. So I think you need to know who you're designing for and what is the market, and then place the design or a product and its identity in that right kind of bracket. That's very important. So coming to second part that I talked about in terms of category codes, I think this is a very important aspect of design identity building. So I have put some, like a formula, but it's not a formula. I think it's very intuitive. So we probably talk about different types of customers, could be consumers, could be industrial customer, could be professional customers, could be different domains, healthcare, defense, agriculture, industrial, automotive, etc. Then there could be different contexts, public use, home use, urban or rural, etc., etc. Then applications, it could be everyday or special purpose. Like, I mean, I use a car every day, but I use, flight sometimes. Those kind of things. Then value proposition could be very exclusive. It could be value for money. It could be a performance product that you want, like a workhorse, or it could be, innovative kind of proposition. So if you just say it's a consumer consumer who's looking for a healthcare, who's got a healthcare challenge, who needs a home-based remedy, is in a rural area, it's a very special purpose thing. Maybe it's a device that tracks woman's pregnancy because she doesn't have access to a hospital, and then it has to be value for money. So you have a category defined. It's a healthcare product, it's a home healthcare product, and it's for rural, value for money customer who doesn't have access to doctor or healthcare facility. So I think it defines the category code, and it's important because if you miss the category code, this is what happens. So Colgate launched foods in 1982, and we all know what happened. Colgate almost lost out as a brand because they're a toothpaste brand, and people couldn't take Colgate food. Then category codes are very important. Like here you see 2 laser printers. Of course, they have different performance definitions. They have different kind of design. They have different capacities, maybe in terms of how many papers they can print at what speed, etc. Maybe power references are different, but one is for home and one is for office. Then, okay, now I want to just talk in terms of design identity system and what are the qualities of a design identity system. I think, and Microsoft has done a great job since the evolution. I think that's what talks about great brands who can last long and evolve with the time. So it should be scalable, progressive, evolving, fresh, unified. I won't spend too much time in terms of how this gets built, but I want to spend time on what is progressive and progressive continuity. So it could be continuity in terms of signature features, so first Mac versus the current Mac, how they carry forward the signatures of command key, or how they carry signatures across different portfolios, how Volkswagen has done, over a, almost century, how they've continued, sort of build a whole continuity in terms of brand and how they kind of sustained. And I think that's the story of great brands, that they can have ups and downs, but they really last long. Then second point I want to talk about is scalability. Scalability could be seen in many ways. It could be scalability in terms of numbers, but it could also be devices, platforms, adjacencies, value propositions, many things. So this is the last point in my talk. I think we've almost done with the time also, right? So design language system management, or the governance piece, is very important. You need to have a team that is assigned stewardship, that can answer the questions. And it could be your designer, it could be your marketing head, could be, two of them, so who understand and eat and breathe. Now, this doesn't have to be done if it's a large corporate. It could also be done in a smaller setup. It could be a very simple system. And I think it's important to have that, because if you don't have it, you'll have the teams reinventing the wheel again and again. You'll have the market launches which are not coherent and consistent. So typically, there are 3 aspects. One could be, your digital products, you could be physical products, and your entire communication. And I'm talking about packaging or whatever you talk about, above the line, social media, etc. And and the 3 broad pillars to it, you should have guidelines. And we're not talking about rule book, we're talking about guidelines in terms of how things should be used. Those are principles, frameworks, do's and don'ts, etc. Then there are libraries of patterns, graphics, assets, platform definition, collection of different artifacts, so which work in the context. And the third part is the design language, the tools and resources that are required. And it could also be some of the software tools, or it could be templates, or how you build them. So which are referred, they essentially adjust into the library, but they are more than just loose assets. So identity signatures, essentially libraries have identity signatures. So what are the core signatures? Could be your logo, could be your brand colors, could be a form detail, or could be your UI signature, etc. Then there are design elements, which is the whole lot of things that go in a design. It could be your icons, could be glyphs, your images, photography, color, material, finishes, could be your sort of architectural references, or could be many things. And then there are components which are like probably putting many elements they bring together, but in terms of defining usability, how things work and how things behave, interaction flows that help you build the product features. Sorry, this is probably, yeah. So it involves again also, of course, icons and UI components, interactions, flows. It could be physical UIs and product behavior, product system behavior, etc., service behavior, etc. Now, of course, with all that, things could still go wrong. I think some of you may have seen this. Apple launched, this the Mac some time back, and this is an ad that IKEA released, saying designed for apples. So in spite of all that identity discussion we had and what I admire about Apple, things could still go wrong, in terms of how some of these brands design things. Last but not the least, if there's an identity system or a language system that one is bringing out, I think it's important to brand it. Like, recently Tata Motors did Impact 2.0 language, design language, and they're branding it because Tata Motors wants to tell the world that they are they arrived as a, sort of a automotive, sort of design and, sort of strategy player on the world scene, and not somebody who made Indica and Indigo and stuff like that. Similarly, Microsoft did the Fluent Design system, and they talk about it as if, it's part of their PR, and I think it's important to do that because it demonstrates change. It's not advertising; it's very soft way of communicating to the world how you're innovating, how you're taking a new position in the market, and how you manage the change perception. Yeah, and it also helps to create energy in the market, with a buzz around, how things are done, because people talk about such things. They get excited when the good brands do good things. So yeah, so if okay, this is where I come back to again 10 principles. And so what I want to say here is, if somebody doesn't have capacity or resources to build the whole design language systems, I would say just adopt these 10 principles to start with, because this will make sure you don't go wrong. You'll stay on track, you'll not spend unnecessary money, you'll not over design things, things won't overrun, and you'll probably start to see your language system emerging from here. So I would, with that, I would say thank you. So any questions, any response, any comments, any criticism, most welcome. I'm also learning along with you.
Great. Thanks, Unmesh. This was extremely enlightening, and there are actually a lot of questions. I don't think we'll be able to cover all of them, but let me take a few which are sort of related to what you spoke. And the first one is related to a slide that you had, which was regarding building strong brand identity. The question is by somebody called Ramchandra Bhatt, who asks, visuals of brands may be essential to get first-time users. However, user convenience and durability by design are the lifeline of brands. So how do you address that particular challenge?
So can you just repeat the last line?
Yeah. Yeah. How? Okay. Just give me a minute. Yeah. Like the visuals of brands are essential. So the visuals of brands are essential to get first-time users. However, user convenience and durability by design are the lifeline of brands. How does the brand owner address this issue at the touch point?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, because I think that's where the whole myth or a misunderstanding about what brand means comes in. And what I would like to say here is the visual part is just the one and only, sort of contact with the end user, where person feels convinced, as sir is saying, that okay, this looks like a cool product, or this looks like something for me, but the whole test lies in how the product behaves, how it works, and how the brand serves that customer along with that. So that's where I would say this prism comes in, because you're talking about a very deep rooted thing in terms of how brand works and serves the customer in multiple touch points, and how does it work, usability piece, so in terms of and depending on how you're defining the principles, ease of use, for example, or certain efficiency in terms of doing the task. For example, in our building management systems, if somebody had to install, say, fire systems, then how fast can you install fire system? Because each day would cost you thousands of dollars in a building. Yeah. So, and you get probably 1 week to do install entire system. So can you do it quicker and faster? And, can you do it without any errors? Those kind of things become extremely important part of user requirements that need to be incorporated in your design and usability. And that could even become a signature at the end of the day, because what we did, for example, in most of our products, we said, how do we get the core usability out and make sure that people can work productively on those aspects, and not sort of every time get into nitty gritties and technicalities. So how do you guide? I mean, when we design the installation commissioning tools, how do you navigate the installer in a step by step manner, where he's not, he's able to manage things more efficiently, and he's not caught up in a big chaos. And I think those are very important things in terms of even defining usability as a signature. Does it answer the question?
Yeah, I guess so. I think we're actually on time to end, but if everybody's comfortable, we can probably take one more question and then close. Is that okay?
Yeah. No, I'm okay if everybody's okay.
All right. And then just before we go into this, I want to just tell everybody that those who have questions and have posted them in the chat and in the forms before, feel free to reach Unmesh on his email address, so that, with your questions, and he will try to answer. I cannot just put it there, but just because of the lack of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, in a culture of throwaway, which is basically short-lived products, how do you develop appeal for a robust or a long-lived product? And this question is by Anil Kumar Pandit.
Yeah. So if we look at the culture of throwaway, and I think we need to understand where that comes from and what has led to that. So to me, culture of throwaway came because certain things are made available very cheap. Could be a pet bottle, could be your fashion garment, could be your sort of a plastic bag or whatever. So to me, there are categories where culture of throwaway exists, and that's a matter of grave concern for fashion industry or a consumer industry, etc. But at the same time, I mean that has been a concern for even appliances as well as technology products like mobile phones and computers. Now, if you ask a consumer, and I really want people who believe there's a throwaway culture from a consumer, would like to go and ask consumer, would they like things to be thrown away all the time? In fact, the answer will be clearly no, because they know somewhere they're paying the cost. Nobody's happy upgrading a phone every 3 years. So it's important that this throwaway culture goes, and that there could be, and it needs to be dealt not just at a brand level or a organization level or a consumer level. It's a systemic problem. When I say systemic problem, there's a whole regulation piece involved. There's a whole, the way things get taxed or the way things get priced, the way things get thrown and the way things get recycled or upcycled. I think there's a lot of loopholes in there. Today, companies don't pay, for example, cost of climate. I mean, if I'm Hindustan Lever, and if I'm bringing out shampoo bottles, I show a lot of concern in terms of how I could use recycled plastic, or how I should take back the plastic or reduce the plastic. But I don't do anything because there's no cost, and any other alternative is more expensive, even including recycling plastic. So it's cheaper to throw it and use a new plastic, because nobody's taxed, say, plastic that gets thrown away. So there's a lot of regulatory issues also. So to me, I feel it's a very complex issue to tackle, but I will come back to design language and the quality of design. See what happens today. If it's a very well designed product, people really don't throw away, and especially in India. And even I've seen that habit abroad. For example, the iPhone or Apple products come in a nicely packed box, and I've seen most people retain some of those boxes to keep things. So in a way, if it's a good design, your heart doesn't tell you to throw it away. So it has to be a good design. It has to fit into the principles that you talked about in terms of its qualities and values. If that happens, then people are quite reluctant to throw things, and there's also tendency, then there's a pride in reusing them also. A lot of times you don't feel very proud to use something. I mean, that's again, we're talking about a user psychology or behavior, and I think that can be changed moment you show some sense of permanence. For example, a plastic bag, if I'm carrying, I don't value it and I don't feel proud carrying it with me. But if I'm sort of given something which I feel proud of owning it. And I've seen people nowadays get a nice bag in a conference and they proudly display it and they use it for their grocery shopping or whatever, using going to office, carrying lunch, many ways. So I feel there's a certain thing that design identity can do, is bring in pride of ownership in use and in design, and that leads to leads to people not throwing things away. And I think that's a very, very important role that design can play in terms of building that perception that I mean, for the product, that I'm not throwaway, I'm not one use, I'm multiple use. Use me carefully, use me for a longer time. So that is a very important thing, and that's where, again, I keep referring to Braun, because a lot of these products people bought 50, 60, 40, 50, 30 years back, they still work. I mean, I have a Braun juicer which still works. I have a Braun shaver that still works. So to me, a good, well-built product, well-designed product, in a very simple manner, in a more timeless kind of a thinking, I think has a lot of value and a lot of lasting power. And I think that's the whole thing, because you establish a dialogue with the consumer. So I mean, I would say that it's a very complex discussion, maybe longer discussion. So does it help?
Yeah, I think already Anil has replied. Thanks for the tip. Well-designed products is not thrown away easily, and then also great to show a sense of permanence. So
Yeah.
I think it's already answered. So
Fantastic.
thanks for that. Can we take a couple of more, if that's okay, Unmesh?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Great. Okay. So then Swayam asks, how can we bring design identity for a product which is not visible from outside, but for example, or a chip or a filter inside the car bonnet? How do you do that? How
Yeah.
do you bring, yeah.
Yeah. I think again, it's a great question, and I would like to, take, say, car bonnet story or a chip story. So if you see how things have evolved in terms of people's understanding of technology. So wherein people took technology as something that I mean, they took it for granted, literally. I mean, when they bought a car and all, unless you're a car geek, you won't find out what it meant to, what is inside the bonnet, right? Or what is inside your radio. I mean, nobody bothered what chips are there inside a radio or a TV till you had computers, and then they talked about Pentium, and then they talked about all kinds of things, right? Now, today, when Intel says Intel Inside, they're actually building a whole brand around that, right? That's a position they're taking, and they're telling people proudly that feel assured that we are inside to help you. So, and then if you start to see how they show the chip and how they sort of project it in terms of how it looks and how it is sort of built, There's a lot of detail that goes into that. I mean, it's not just a piece of. I mean, it's not just a chip with some metal connectors that is slapped there. It has clear branding. It has some specifications. It has markings. It has a shape. It has a fairly sort of a characteristic shape, AMD versus Intel. So I think there's a lot of designing that's going on into what goes on inside. So if you open a bonnet, for example, of a Fiat from 70s or 80s, I mean, it had a very raw cast iron engine and loose parts like filters and wires and cables and pipes hanging. Whereas if you open the bonnet of a sort of a BMW or a even why go BMW, even Maruti of today, or Honda City or something, you'll see a fairly well designed compact sort of architecture. And then you'll see a air filter which is very easy to access and is right in front. And the whole design is done such a way that person knows which side is up and down, which side is to twist and which side to hold and which side to lock and which side to tighten. So I think those are all again part of the design signatures. So in terms of how do you design a product that it's not saying that oh, you're a rich guy or a poor guy, or it's not doing that, but it's telling you how to use it. And I feel that's a way category codes kick in. And I think I emphasize a lot, because people tend to look at Apple phone and design, say car engine, it's not going to work. I mean, I think those are different categories. Or if you see a fashion product, or it's not going to work if you're designing a air filter for a car or a chip. So category codes are very important, because people would perceive things in that context very well. I mean, they may not be able to articulate, but they have some expectations from a chip or a car filter, and I think that should be fulfilled. So filter should look like a filter. Filter should not look like a modem or a speaker, or or a iPad or something. So I feel it's very important that even the semantics discussion is part of the whole identity plan. In terms of meaning of product.
All right. Not sure, but maybe we'll take this as the last question. This is from Himanshu, who says, many have been critical of Audi's design language due to similarities in their cars, and now the same type of feedback is coming to Mercedes-Benz, where a $120,000 S-Class looks very similar to a $25,000 front-wheel drive A-Class. Any views on how to maintain the family design language by still maintaining individuality?
Yeah. So I think what has happened, I see a trend in terms of automotive industry is taking a lot of cues from tech industry, which includes, we just saw the Volkswagen logo, which is like a, sort of like a wire, or a thin line kind of logo, which is probably, you'll see a lot of icons designed in a similar way today. So it falls into some of those trends. Now, I'm not an auto guy, so I haven't studied how this Mercedes-Benz 25K and 125K are designed, and when they're similar, when people say they're similar, what do they mean? But I agree in some categories, for example, in the automotive thing, where you're paying, double, than some other car, then you would like to show that, because I mean, you don't spend that kind of money just for nothing. Whereas if you're driving a Maruti 800 or a Alto or whatever, you may not want to show that this is a non-AC or this is a AC. I mean, there's no visible difference. That's still okay. But in a case like this, I think it becomes very important. So in the early days, they had ways to do that in terms of real wood paneling, or they had things about size, or how trims looked like and how the leather looked like, and all kinds of things. But to me, this is more like a tech approach, where you have iPhone, say 11 or 12, whether it's 256, or unless, I mean, you just have a screen size change between two models, but within the same size screen, same model, you don't know which one somebody's paid almost 50% more because the person has bought 1 gigabyte, so sort of 1 terabyte or 500 GB or 256 GB or 125 GB or 16 GB memory, So I think that probably it doesn't matter in a phone, but whereas in a Mercedes, probably somebody's trying to show off, So I think there it might matter. But I would say this is also coming out of the platform approach that a lot of companies are taking up. Now, if you see Volkswagen and Audi, and they built on a certain platform, and I think that's an approach which a lot of auto companies are adopting today. What Volkswagen did, and then you have a lot of commonalities and a few elements that differentiate the car, and I think that's a very efficient way of designing and producing cars. And only thing is, you need to make sure that the value perception needs to be managed through the identity and the design elements. So I don't know much about auto, honestly, but I would sort of analyze as that.
All right. Great. I think that was the last question that we will take today. It's already 6:30, but thanks for everybody for your time. I would of course like to thank Unmesh on behalf of the design track, but I will also hand it over to Vinod, and he will sort of formally close this session.
Yeah. Thank you, Roshan, for handing it over, and it was a wonderful session. Let me start with a formal word of thanks with the right set of people. First of all, I should say that this is quite a complicated, a complex concept to convey. Meaning, branding or brand is more of a very subtle thinking to build a culture. So you knock, step by step to build a culture through branding. And thank you so much, Mr. Unmesh, founder of Oceanic Circles, has brought in your experience as well as your deeper understanding of the concept to nourish us with the right set of tools to go forward. And thank you so much where you find the time to give us the brand experience. And now, thank you, Mr. Devesh Kaktu, who's CEO IITB Alumni Association, for giving a welcome note for the event. And thank you, Devesh and Ms. Namita Lobo, COO IITB Alumni Association, for continued encouragement and support for Bangalore events. I hope you can hear, right, Roshan? Yeah, fine, thank you. All right, so thanks, and especially thank you, Dr. Smita, for our President Bangalore chapter, for creating this design track or helping us, set this track in motion. And there's a lot of effort by her in putting this in place, and all the other events which she is trying to organize from Bangalore, out of Bangalore. And sincere thanks to the design track coordinators and the other team members, especially Mr. Bhushan and Ruchin, for all his effort and initiative. And it's all happening because of him. And he brought in this idea. And I think this is going to be the start. And it's a good start. And it's going to continue happening. And especially on the the whole idea, all the creatives and all the content what you have created in promoting the event. And thank you so much, Ruchin, for that. And many thanks, Pramod. I think he's the one who has doing all the rounds of promotion internally, starting from the Google Forms, enabling that and making people register, and sharing the Zoom link and so on. And thank you so much for coordinating and finding out it's me who's there in the pseudonym. Sorry about it, but yeah. And a heartfelt thanks to Divyam Goyal, CEO Attain You, and Executive Committee Member Bangalore Chapter, for enabling us to utilize the Zoom Pro account. Yeah, I think we've been using a Zoom Pro account for quite a while now, and from June from June onwards, it's been told. Yeah. And thank you so much for that, and especially thanks for all the publicity I think done by Mr. Bidyut Datta, EC member, Bangalore chapter, for posting in all the hyperlocal groups. There are around 9 groups, I believe. And thanks for all the other, the Bangalore chapter members in, posting in their respective groups and their batch groups and so on. And Mr. Devesh for posting in the design event central ITB social media platforms. Yeah, and that's a good boost, and there's a good turnout as well. And thanks Mr. Ali for posting on UAE chapter group, and Rijas for chapter VP group, and Smita for ITB LinkedIn group, Pramod on chapter lead groups, and Tamana on Bangalore chapter Telegram group, Utsav for posting on Pan ITB group, ITB domain specific groups on Telegram. Thanks to Bhushan and Vinod for posting, for Design B design groups, ITB design groups, and Gaurav Shinde for office executive, ITB Alumni Association Central Office, and publishing the event in the Bangalore chapter mailing list. And last but not the least, thank you everyone for making it this, and each and every one of the participants. I believe some of them left, but it was wonderful, and I'm sure there are a lot of interesting questions were also being asked. And please do send your questions to Mr. Unmesh if at all you couldn't ask in this short time. But yeah, and thank you so much again, Mr. Unmesh. It's really wonderful hearing it from you, and thank you everyone. And I hope I covered most of the names. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Vinod, and thanks everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a good, wonderful evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Good.
Bye, guys.